Hallowed Be Thy Name. A Tale of Alcatraz. The cold stone walls of Alcatraz prison had always whispered of death. They had seen too many lives broken and too many souls lost to the sea that roared relentlessly against the cliffs. For the men locked inside, the prison wasn't just a place of confinement. It was a tomb in which they were buried alive, stripped of hope, time, and dignity. Johnny McAllister had been one of the notorious convicts of the island, a hardened criminal caught in a botched robbery that left a guard dead. He was sent to Alcatraz, the final resting place for those the world wanted to forget. He was no stranger to violence, and his days were spent in isolation, surrounded by the same grey stone that matched the colour of his heart. Yet, as the years passed, something began to change. The cold, indifferent walls seemed to bear witness to his growing desperation, a desperation that turned into a gnawing question: what awaited him after death? One night, as the full moon cast eerie shadows on the bars of his cell, Johnny lay wide awake on his cot, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts drifted to the day of his conviction, the gavel striking down with finality, sentencing him to life. He thought of the family he'd never see again, the love he had lost in the pursuit of violence. But most of all, he thought of death, of how it was coming for him, closer and closer with every passing day. He could hear the sounds of the night, the distant clanging of prison doors, the muffled cries of men losing their minds, the howling wind that cut through the cracks of the ancient prison. The air was thick with the taste of salt, the ocean's eternal reminder that no one could escape Alcatraz. But that night something was different. There was a presence in the air, a sense of doom that hung over the island like a storm cloud. And in the stillness of his cell, Johnny's thoughts began to spiral. The guards had grown accustomed to his silence, his unyielding defiance. They ignored his constant brooding, perhaps even knowing that it was only a matter of time before he too would be claimed by the madness of Alcatraz. But tonight, Johnny wasn't thinking about escape. He wasn't even thinking about survival. No, tonight, the walls around him seemed to close in as his mind raced with the one question he could no longer ignore. Was there life after death? The door to his cell creaked open and a figure stepped inside, a priest. Father O'Malley, a man whose visits Johnny had always resisted, now stood at the threshold. His face was as weathered as the walls of the prison, and his eyes held a deep sadness that Johnny couldn't ignore. "You're in a dark place, Johnny," Father O'Malley said softly, his voice a whisper against the roar of the wind outside. "But there's a way out, a way to find peace before it's too late." Johnny sat up, his chains clinking as he shifted. He looked at the priest with cold, empty eyes, but deep inside there was a flicker of something fragile, something he had buried long ago. "I don't believe in peace," Johnny muttered, his voice hoarse. "I don't believe in anything but the end." Father O'Malley sighed and took a step forward, his worn hands clasped in prayer. "The end will come for all of us, Johnny. But there is a difference between dying and living, even in a place like this. You still have time. You can make your peace." Johnny laughed bitterly, his heart pounding in his chest. He was a prisoner in more ways than one, locked away in this desolate place, shackled by his past. "Peace," he spat. "What do I need peace for? I'm already dead. The man I was is gone." The priest's eyes softened, and he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, worn Bible. He opened it slowly, his fingers tracing the pages as if searching for the right words. Sometimes, even in our darkest moments, we can find redemption. Sometimes we can be forgiven. Johnny scoffed. "Forgiven? For what? For all the blood I've spilled? For all the lives I've ruined?" Father O'Malley didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the Bible and placed it in Johnny's hands. "Forgiveness isn't about what you've done, Johnny. It's about what you choose to do with the time you have left." The words hit Johnny like a thunderclap. He was silent for a long time, the weight of the Bible heavy in his hands. He had never thought about forgiveness. He had never wanted it. But something in the priest's words stirred something deep inside him, something he had buried for years. He had spent so much time running from his own sins, running from the truth. But now, standing on the edge of his own death, the truth felt unavoidable. The guard's footsteps echoed down the hall, signaling the end of the priest's visit. Father O'Malley stood up, preparing to leave. Johnny clutched the Bible tighter, his mind racing. For the first time, he realized that the real question wasn't whether he could escape this prison, but whether he could escape the prison of his own soul. Father O'Malley paused at the door, his hand resting on the cold metal. "Hallowed be thy name," he whispered, as if saying a prayer over Johnny. The words lingered in the air like a final benediction. As the priest walked away, Johnny remained in the darkness, the Bible clutched tightly in his hands. The sound of the guards grew louder, their boots thudding in time with his heart. The air was thick with the smell of salt water and decay, and as the cell door slammed shut, Johnny closed his eyes and whispered softly, his voice barely audible over the noise of the world around him, "Hallowed be thy name." And with that, his final breath left him, his body falling limp in the shadows of the prison that had held him captive for so long.